Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from Melbourne, Australia, Mr. Gary Ryan. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh, and congratulations on the amazing giving that you've been doing through the Brand Called You and your podcast over the past 4 years or so. Well done.
Thank you so much. Gary is the founder and owner of Organizations That Matter. He is a human-centered leadership coach. He's an author, and all of you know I'm very partial to authors. So he's an author of several books, What Really Matters for Young Professionals, How to Master 15 Practices to Accelerate Your Career. And then he's got Disruption Leadership Matters, Lessons for Leaders from the Pandemic, and you can see both the books behind him. He's also been influenced by Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and Gary has completed 11 marathons. Gary, what an amazing career you've had. But before we start talking about Organizations That Matter, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ashutosh. Firstly, I'm very lucky to be here, alive that is, because I am number 9 of 11 children.
Wow.
So particularly in a country like Australia, there actually aren't very many number 9s of 11 children. So at an early age, I became very grateful for the fact that I was born, and I'm also a twin. So I did get out before my twin brother. And I come from a very proudly blue collar, as we would describe it, family. My father was a tradesman as a carpenter, and all of my 6 brothers have gone down that path. In fact, I have 64 first cousins. My father was one of 13 children. My mother was one of 6. So I have 64 first cousins. And at the time that I got my first degree, I was the first male in our entire family to go down the white collar path. Wow. Many have ended up there over time, but I was the first one. So I really grew up in a family where, as you'll learn soon, that the way that my parents put us children first and served us first. So servant leadership is a term that I would use. My parents were natural servant leaders, as many parents are, but there were some key details in my journey that took me down my path. And one of them was the fact that when I got my first degree as a physical education secondary level teacher here in Australia, no one could get a job. There were 0 jobs. So we all had to go down a different path. And I'm actually very grateful for that challenging time because of where that's helped me end up over time.
Very interesting. So let's now talk about Organizations That Matter and you being a human-centered leadership coach. What led you to become a coach?
What led me to becoming a coach was found fundamentally when I was 10 years old. My parents would sit us down and ask us where we wanted to go to secondary school. Now, I was very, very fortunate, Ashutosh, that I grew up literally in the shadows of Monash University here in Melbourne, Australia. It had only started in the decade of which I was born. So it was quite a young university at the time. And that building, the iconic Menzies building there really struck me as I would ride my bicycle around there. And so when I was 10 years of age, the answer to my father in particular was, I want to go to university. And he said, I'm asking you about secondary school, not university. And I said, well, I know I don't want to be a tradesperson like yourself and all my brothers, and I want to go to university. And he said, well, what are you going to do at university? And I said, I don't know. I just know that I don't want to be a tradesperson. And then he turned to my twin brother and he said, so what do you want to do? Do you want to go to university too? And he said, oh, no, I want to be a tradesperson. So my father actually went and got a second part-time job. He already had one full-time job. Wow. He already had a part-time job. He went and got a second part-time job to pay for me to go to the local boys' college. That would increase the chances I could go to university. And my own twin brother went to the same school, the local technical school where all my other brothers went to learn how to be a tradesperson. So that was a really key life example. And then when I was in my early 20s, and I was in fact a manager, and I was commercialising a gymnasium for Monash University at their Caulfield and then Peninsula campuses, At the same time, I'd become a local senior football coach for an Australian rules football team in our amateur competition. It was a very young club, and even though I was only 27, I was one of the oldest people in the club. And here I was leading, 60 young men, as it was, in that environment. And I chose to do a values-based approach, which I had learned from Stephen Covey's book. And 3 months into that role, which I did for 4 years, and it was a fabulous learning experience. I do encourage anyone that never, ever underestimate the value of coaching from a leadership development point of view in the sporting world, or maybe in the arts, or something like that, where you've got actually other people's development and care in your hands, and how you can build a culture. 3 months into that, Ashutosh, I realized that I wasn't doing what I was doing in this club environment where everyone was choosing to be there and no one was getting paid. I actually wasn't doing it in the workplace where people were getting paid. And I said to myself, why aren't I doing that at work? And really, there wasn't a valid reason not to do it at work. So I started to build a values-based and human-centered approach to my management style and my leadership style in that environment. And we just started achieving amazing results and winning national service excellence awards, rubbing our shoulders with very large organizations here in Australia. And it convinced me that way works.
Amazing. And tell me, how do you define human-centered leadership?
It's through the term human being to start with. You see, and I know through many of your interviews, you've interviewed a lot of HR professionals. And what's fascinating, Ashutosh, is what I find in my work and the HR professionals. Mind you, my second degree was a graduate diploma in human resource management, so I'm qualified to speak about this. When I was doing that degree, it really hit me that this degree is not about human beings. It's about systems and processes and tools to treat people as a widget, as a number, as a part of the system. And it really struck me, that's not what human beings are. Through my ongoing reading, I'm an absolute avid reader. Behind these post signs behind me are bookshelves full of books.
Right.
And I am I know the young folk don't like to read, but one thing you can do to get yourself ahead, and that's why my book's on Audible as well, is listen to or read books. Absolutely. I know you're a very deep reader too. But what I discovered is that human resource professionals don't actually understand where the term human resources even came from. If you think about it, human resources is an oxymoron.
Correct.
We're not resources. A pen's a resource, a computer, this microphone in front of you.
Correct.
Human beings are far more, and I'll give you a D. Hock quote in a second. I'll explain who D. Hock was. But people don't realize that the term human resources came from Henry Ford when he hired Frederick Winslow Taylor in 1908 to work with him and establish the scientific management method, which was an amazing methodology for efficiency and effectiveness.
Right.
But that methodology is a scientific management method. The theory of it, the underpinning mindset is that human beings are part of the machine. And humans resources, the concept of human resources was born from scientific management. So we have terms like human capital. People say things like, people are the most important asset in my business. You know what? If people are your most important asset, that implies by the very language that you can buy and sell human beings, and that's called slavery.
Correct.
Right? Now, I would have thought the world had realized that slavery is not how to treat other human beings, and we're still fighting in the 21st century against slavery in our world.
Right.
And so people need to understand that the language we use actually has meaning. So I say to human resource professionals that I work with is this, I challenge them and say, if you don't believe that human beings are human resources, do what you can internally to change your title, change the name of your department, call it people and culture, call it organizational development, whatever it might be, but don't call it human resources, because that will drive you to behaving in a way that treats human beings as a number. Now, I want to share a quote that's in the start of my recent book, Disruption Leadership Matters. from D. Hock. Now, Ashutosh, are you familiar with who D. Hock is?
No.
D. Hock was the founder of Visa International.
Oh, okay.
Arguably, for most of its history, the most profitable, and certainly now still one of the most profitable businesses in the world.
Yep.
And it was born out of a financial crisis of 1964 with credit cards. And it took 7 years for the creation of Visa International to occur through D's leadership. And he, at the time in 1964, he was hiding as a branch manager in rural USA. And I say hiding because he says the Bank of America, which was his employer, was the lion, and he described himself as the lamb. Wow. And so he wanted to keep the lamb as far away from the lion as possible. Amazing. However, when that crisis occurred, he ended up nominating himself to lead what then became Visa International. And this is what D. Hock says. He says, people are not things to be manipulated, labeled, boxed, bought, and sold. Above all else, they are not human resources. They are entire human beings containing the whole of the evolving universe, limitless until we start limiting them. We must examine the concept of leading and following with new eyes.
Right. Wow.
This is the founder of one of our most profitable businesses, but he understood that human beings are not resources. And the reason why my company is called Organizations That Matter is because I work with organizations that understand that they have human beings in them and human beings matter. And guess what? When you do that, all of the financial success that you want, all of the growth that you want comes. And we know this to be true through the now growing number of concrete examples around the world where leaders who genuinely lead from this perspective are creating amazing results. But the fascinating thing, Ashutosh, is they're not doing what I'm suggesting because it's a strategy. And this is a fundamental issue. Not a strategy to treat human beings as human beings. A fundamental principle first. And there is a difference.
Right. Okay.
So
well said.
That's what led me to becoming a human-centered leader. Now, I don't just do coaching. I work with organizations, leaders, and their cultures to go down this path.
Well said. My next question to you, Gary, is that what are some of the common challenges a lot of leaders face when trying to adopt a human-centric approach?
The pre-existing mindset and the pressure for the short term, and we need to get results now, and the time to create clarity. So I talk a lot about cash is king. In whether you're a for-profit or not-for-profit organization, you need money, okay? The world costs. Clarity is queen. Now, we need our king and our queen to work together to create success. So what do I mean by clarity is queen? Too many people are not able to say out loud or articulate what the key responsibilities for their job is, nor can they say out loud how they would know they were doing a great job. So if you have people that aren't clear enough to say those two things out loud, that means that a lot of the work that they're doing is the wrong work. And what I find with a lot of leaders in challenging themselves to go down this path is it does take some time to build clarity, but it's an exponential curve. You know how exponential curves work in terms of, and this is a mathematical fact. A mathematical fact with exponential curves is you never get to the curve part without going through the flat bit first.
Correct.
Right? And so you have to put the time in to build clarity, because the more clarity people have, the more autonomous they can become. The more autonomous they are, the more decisions they're making that are the right decisions about doing the right work at the right time, which means you become more effective and more efficient, which means you deliver on your results. So that is the biggest challenge, is that starting point of investing in the time. So how do they do that? Because this is really important. Always start with the employee first. Ask them, what are your 3 to 6 key responsibilities? And I have a template that people can access if they buy my second book, Disruption Leadership Matters. There's a free resource template that does this. then identify what they believe would be the key indicators, which don't have to be quantitative. They could be qualitative. It could be just a green, yellow, and red sign, for example, that I think I'm on track or otherwise. But then equally, what are the names of the people or groups of people with whom I need to develop a key relationship, and I need to be responsible for nurturing that relationship so I can deliver on my key responsibilities. You see, Ashutosh, I've found that a lot of people, even if they do know what success in their role from a responsibilities point of view looks like, they're nowhere near clear enough about the relationships they need to take responsibility to nurture because of their direct impact on those responsibilities.
Well said. Well said. You also talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. So I wanted to ask you, what role does emotional intelligence play in human-centered leadership?
If you aren't at least working on your emotional intelligence, I doubt that you could be a human-centered leader.
Okay.
So if your world is very close to you, and if those people watching this video will see this, if you're on the audio podcast, you can't see my hands are moving very close to my head. But if your worldview is so about you and you haven't worked on your self-awareness, and therefore you are lacking social awareness, because self-awareness leads to social awareness, your emotional intelligence will be low, and you won't be picking up the cues from the people that you're leading and or are your peers that there's conversations we need to have that we're not having. So emotional intelligence is absolutely critical. And you know, for a lot of folk, that means they're going to need to engage at least a mentor and often certainly a coach to help them with that, because you can't develop them if you haven't, if you're not getting feedback.
Well said. So now I'm going to move to one or two questions on coaching and then to your book. Given your own amazing understanding of leadership and human-centered relationships, leadership, and given your own background that you told me about being the number 9 of 11 children, how has your own background supported your coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
I guess it's just in my blood from my family, the servant leadership approach. I haven't shared that I have 5 children myself.
Okay.
And I guess through when you have 5 children in the modern age, that's a large family. Again, in a country like Australia, there's not very many people have that. And my wife, my beautiful wife, I mean, I get so much inspiration from Michelle, who would do absolutely anything for her 5 children and myself and the rest of her family. But equally, it's the people that I've come to learn from and work with, Ashutosh. People like Bob Chapman. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his book, Everybody Matters. He's the CEO of the Barry Waymiller Group in the USA. Extraordinary journey, and an organization where Simon Sinek, when he visited them in 2012, said, "Oh my gosh, here is an organization doing everything I preach." And I wasn't sure that what I preached could be put into practice, but now I can see that it is living and existing. And therefore, folks, what I'm preaching works. People like Jason Lippert from the Lippert Group, again, many thousands of employees. Again, in industries that are not typically known for caring about human beings. And these folk have shown that you can absolutely care and grow and put people first. And again, I mentioned, we spoke earlier about my reading over time. I've been very fortunate to be able to go and find stories. I mean, Cheryl Bachelder did amazing transformation with Popeye's Group in the USA, and she, when she took over in 2007, between then and 2015, her entire plan was, I'm going to put servant leadership theory to the test here. Now, if we just go on the numbers that people love, when she took over as CEO, the share price was around $11 USA. In 2015, when the company got then sold, it was $94 per share. And purely done on servant leadership, putting human beings first. And then from an Asian point of view, Super Chai Ravanant, is he someone that you're familiar with from the CP group out of Thailand?
No.
gave 400,000 employees in 20 countries, and Superchy at the very start of the pandemic, nearly to the day, actually, 3 years ago, announced to the 400,000 employees that he and his fellow executive team, no one was going to lose their job for however long the pandemic worked, because he had gotten the leadership team and leaders to go and find the budget line items, the non-human salary budget line items that would pay for people's salaries, even though some people were not going to be producing anything for a period of time and would need retraining. I share that because being in the West myself, and you probably experience this, and possibly some of your audience too. I think the West can be very biased towards Western countries and underestimates the amazing things that companies are doing in Asia and also in India.
Amazing. So now let's move to your books. Your new book is Disruption Leadership Matters. Tell me a little bit about the book and what was the hypothesis when you started to read it. But before that, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check Gary Ryan's book on Amazon. I'm going to check it myself. So tell me about your book.
Yes. So at the start of the pandemic, what I saw was a lot of leaderships that have been espousing our people, our greatest asset, and all of those sorts of things. The real truth of what their mindset was when they started sacking them or putting them out of work within weeks of the start of the pandemic. We had organizations here in Australia that you never would have thought didn't have the financial resources. Literally within weeks of the start of that global lockdown, we went basically making people redundant in their workforce. So see you later, you look after yourself. And so I could have written a book about all the negative aspects of the human resource view of the world, because I believe the pandemic was the test for leaders as to what do you really believe about the people you're leading, okay? Now, I'm not suggesting that every company had heaps of money sitting in the corner waiting for a pandemic. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that, there was lots of leaders who I came across through the research from my book who were running very small companies. So I cover what I wanted to do, Ashutosh, was the theory was I want to find the companies, big, large and small, who are putting their people first during this period. And I want to know, what did they do? How did they do that? And so my book does have global organizational examples right down to small businesses where the owner of the business sat down with all of the staff and said, hey, I don't have a bucket of gold anywhere to pay for this. What can we do together to get through this? Because I still need to pay for my family too.
Correct.
And together they came up with decisions that in some cases were similar to what the other organizations did. But it's very different when that decision is you are told you are going to use all of your leave. You are told you are going to have to go to 0.2 of your 1.0 employment status. Maybe you could get to that result. It could be the same result, but you can do it a different way when you treat people as humans. So that was what my book was about. Combined with, so the second hypothesis was, I wanted my book to also be a methodology for people irrespective of the pandemic. So I wanted it to be a how-to book about how do you go about leading a human-centered way. And while the stories and the focus were about the pandemic, my tools and techniques are a how-to irrespective.
Fascinating. So we've got time for one more question, Gary, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing understanding of leadership, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want a lot of our viewers and listeners to take away from your own understanding and your journey and our conversation?
Well, the first one is, thank you, Ashutosh, is be responsible for your development yourself. And if you are working for an organization, absolutely embrace and utilize whatever they have on offer for you to help you develop. But please, please, please don't sit there and wait for your organization to develop you. Do things like what you're doing now. Listen to podcasts like this. Actually go and check out the books. Build up your own personal library. But first and foremost, be responsible for yourself and your learning. So powerful when you do that. Second is, which is chapter 6 in my book, Disruption Leadership Matters, develop your conversational skills. Here's a simple theory. The quality of our conversations that we have leads to the quality of the decisions that are therefore made. The quality of the decisions we make impacts the quality of our actions, and the cumulative effect of our actions over time impacts the quality of our performance. So it creates a reinforcing loop. If the quality of the conversations to starts with is low, think about the impact on our decisions, on our actions, on our overall performance. However, most people have no idea whether they're contributing to a high-quality conversation or a low-quality conversation.
Correct.
They haven't developed the competencies. So I have a simple model and some very, very specific techniques that are absolutely learnable by anybody, where you could be one person in a conversation with 30 people, and you as one person can raise, through your skills, the quality of the rest of the conversation. It's absolutely possible. And that's better for us all because we make better decisions and take better actions and get better results. And the third part is, which we were speaking about earlier, Ashutosh, is be clear about your role now. Be able to say out loud, this is the name of my job or my role. These are the 3 to 6 things at a high level I'm responsible for. And for each one of them, this is how I would know that I'm being successful. And equally, this is the list of key people that I am responsible for nurturing relationships with so that I can deliver on my key responsibilities. They're the 3 things I encourage you.
Fascinating. And on that note, Gary, and your 3 amazing lessons. First one is so powerful. Be responsible for your own development. Second, you said, and a lot of people I have seen don't look after this particular aspect, which is to develop your own communication skills. And the third one, be clear about your role today. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. Thank you for speaking to me about organizations that matter. I think I learned several new things, more particularly on human resources or human beings being our assets. I think this is such eye-openers for me as well. Thank you also for speaking to me about your books. Your latest one, Disruption Leadership Matters, should be a very, very interesting read. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck.
I really appreciate your time, Ashutosh. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.